So in this segment, we're going to be discussing Britain prepared to consider leaving the ECHR if it blocks illegal migration plan. It's a funny title in the Telegraph saying we're prepared to leave the court if it blocks our illegal migration plans. That's something. I'll tell you that is something. So essentially, what the UK are looking to do is bully the ECHR, just like we bullied our own domestic courts, and we have the man in charge to do it, which is Dominic Raab, the man who is accused credibly of bullying himself, and he's going to go ahead and try and bully the ECHR. Good luck with that, chump. Britain is prepared to consider leaving the European Convention of Human Rights, the ECHR, if the Strasbourg court blocks the government's plans to crack down on illegal migration, asylum seekers. Dominic Raab has warned. So this paragraph is just so funny. We're preparing to consider leaving the ECHR. You continue these actions and we will consider leaving. That's not really a strong threat. We will prepare to think about things. A real threat would be if you continue like this, we will leave. Pathetic stuff here. Not that I want the UK to leave the ECHR, but if you're going to issue a threat, you got to be a bit more convincing than we will consider leaving. We're going to consider the consider. The Justice Secretary said the government was committed to staying within the ECHR and would, quote, strive every sinew, end quote, to remain within it, but could not, quote, rule out forever and a day the possibility we might need to revisit our membership, end quote. That sounds like a threat, a veiled one, but still a threat, and the article is full of them. He told the House of Lords Justice Committee that this would, however, depend on the, quote, responsiveness, end quote, of the ECHR in Strasbourg to Britain's new legislation effectively barring asylum seekers who arrive, quote, illegally from claiming asylum in the UK. So the UK wants the ECHR to change in response to what the UK does. That's not how the judiciary works or how it's meant to work. I guess I'll have to educate our Injustice Minister on this. Courts are meant to rule things based on what the laws are. That won't be just domestic law, but according to the ECHR rules as well under the convention. That's something the UK cannot dictate. Raab, a guy who worked for The Hague, let's not forget. Ministers believe the legislation complies with the ECHR, but acknowledge the novel approach, quote, pushes the boundaries of international law and have a more than 50% chance of breaching the UK's obligations under the ECHR. So it's pretty clear that they're trying to play it as, look, we're not looking to break the law, we're going to push the boundaries, and that's about it. We think we're within the rules, but we can't guarantee that. It either does comply or it doesn't. I'm sure they could have asked their expensive lawyers about it, or maybe they asked certain lawyers for certain answers. But what they wanted, in my opinion, is for the ECHR to do another injunction or rule against the UK. They have no intention of leaving the ECHR, in my opinion, but they will continue to use this in the war, the culture war. This damn foreign court is stopping us. Who elected them anyways? We voted Brexit to leave European courts, etc. It's just fuel for the culture war. The Tories have bullied domestic courts into giving them more favourable decisions, especially on deportations and things regarding asylum seekers, threatening to, create a US-style court system which is heavily politicised and just really broken. They can't bully the ECHR like that, but anything they can do to add to the culture war, they'll do it. Ministers are preparing to take on the ECHR over the use of interim injunctions, such as the one which blocked the first deportation flight to Rwanda last June. Let's not forget that injunction wasn't put in the last minute like the government claims to do, and do so within the article. I think the injunction was put in the evening, but the government tried to make a show of it by putting people on this flight and then essentially stopping it at the last minute. Mr. Raab disclosed that he already met with senior judges, Strasbourg judges, to discuss UK concerns over interim injunctions, where a single unnamed judge in a late night sitting, this is nonsense, last summer blocked the first deportation flight to Rwanda. Until the entire policy had been tested in the UK court. So what the ECHR, let's think about this. If the ECHR had not put this injunction in, the asylum seekers would have been deported to Rwanda. So imagine a scenario where the UK courts rule some of these asylum seekers would be allowed to stay in the UK instead of them being sent to Rwanda. The issue is they would have already been sent to Rwanda. So the government would have to either fly them back, to which the UK would, result in an embarrassing climb down, or they would keep trying to appeal where if they would lose, they would hopefully eventually climb down. Or if they felt really nasty, they can try and refuse to fly them back. They can say, oh, well, they're in Rwanda now, nothing we can do. And that's probably what the government will try and do, ignore court rulings. Overall, in my opinion, the ECHR made the right decision. Keep the asylum seekers here where they can have direct access to their legal representation, because these are cases going through British courts and they can deal with the courts in person rather than through video calls, which is not ideal. English wouldn't be the first language for a lot of these people as well, so dealing through that via a video call is just a nightmare. The government are crying about the injunction like it's a major injunction, like it's a major thing. We don't know which ECHR judge made the call, but when they hear the case in June, all the judges' names will be public. The Tories are trying to make this a bigger deal than it is. I think the ECHR ruling is fine. Sadly, people are falling for it. The injunction makes sense. According to Blackstone Chambers, quote, on the evening of the 14th of June, the European Court of Human Rights granted an application for interim measures by one of the individual claimants that and held that in light of the risk that he would suffer contrary to his human rights and in, quote, the absence of any legally enforceable mechanism, end quote, to ensure his return to the UK in the event of a judicial review success, the court would grant the interim measure to prevent his removal, quote, until the domestic courts had the opportunity to first consider those issues, end quote. So all they said was, look, whilst you're considering the decisions, he's got to stay in the UK. That's it. And based on what the court's saying here, it looks like the ECHR aren't convinced that the UK would actually fly back any of these claimants if they were successful in the British courts. The ECHR argued that the asylum seeker that was facing deportation would have real risk to their human rights. Now, did they mean they would be in danger if they were deported to Rwanda, i.e. would Rwanda not be the glorious place the Tories keep describing, or did the ECHR mean something else, like the UK potentially refusing to fly them back to the UK from Rwanda? Tory MPs are preparing to lay amendments to the illegal immigration bill, which would, the fact that the Telegraph acknowledge it's, it's just nonsense. The name of the bill is just nonsense. That would toughen the approach to the ECHR so that the government could ignore interim injunctions and even wider rulings. However, they have accepted any debate around leaving the ECHR would have to be left for the manifesto. That's not actually true. They've made decisions outside of the manifesto. They've broken manifesto promises. The key is, this shows you they have no intention of leaving the ECHR. What they're trying to do is weaken the ECHR as much as possible, trying to undermine their rulings, which in the broader context of the UK is really bad. But they won't leave it because of the Pandora's box it opens with the Good Friday Agreement. They're saying, it's got to be in the manifesto. Nonsense. If they wanted to do it, they would do it. The simple fact is they don't have the guts to do it because they know the consequences, and rightfully so they should be wary of them. Last week, Sunak warned lawyers preparing to challenge his illegal immigration crackdown, said that he is, quote, up for the fight and will win, end quote, and he accused the ECHR of being, quote, opaque, unfair and unjust, end quote. He made clear, however, he had no plans to leave it. All of the decisions and the rulings are made public, the court decisions. So Sunak's arguments make no sense. And if he thinks he can win, then how could the ECHR be so unfair and unjust? Surely they would just vote against the UK if this was the case. He really makes no sense here. And surely if the ECHR, the courts were so unfair, so opaque and unjust, surely we should leave it then. Unless, of course, that's not the case and you're just talking nonsense as always. Sunak's a joke, honestly, and the arguments that he makes here and this article from the Telegraph is just horrendously bad. Anyways, I'm going to leave it there. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Like, comment, share, subscribe. Support the channel on Patreon if you can, and hopefully I'll see you in the next one.